Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. My guest today is Dr. Meghan Herron, and she is a board-certified veterinary behaviorist, which I think is a particularly important niche in the world of pet care, because we obviously need all of the medical care, but we need the behavioral elements too. And when I was training, I really saw that there was so much interplay between health and behavior that it's awesome that there are so many veterinary behaviorists coming along, and also heartbreaking that there are so few to serve the needs of all of the pets in the United States. So how many are there, Dr. Herron? Do you remember how many board-certified veterinary behaviorists there are?
Oh, gosh, I know I was number 50.
You were number 50.
And I think we have close to doubled. And that was 13 years ago. So as you said, yay that there's more of us, but it's kind of sad that we've only doubled in over a decade and not, more than that, considering, if you look at the other specialties in veterinary medicine. We're a very small college, but growing, chugging along, trying to get as many more as we can.
I think it's so important. So important.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of the veterinary schools, slowly but surely are starting to appreciate it as a necessary part of veterinary education, because that's where the bulk of the training is happening, is in the academic institutions. We have a lot that are in private practice doing what we call a non-traditional training, but it's a much slower path because you don't have all the resources that an academic institution would. And so slowly but surely we are getting more and more people board certified. But it's a daunting task when you're trying to put that program together on your own. I certainly trained residents in the academic manner, and I've trained residents in the non-traditional manner. It definitely is, you've got a harder path ahead of you. And a lot of people, I think, get into practice and they're like, gosh, I'm successful. I've got this business going. Do I really have to write case reports and study for boards? Because this is life-changing. You lose weeks of your life studying for that test. But I always tell people, my residents who are just feeling overwhelmed and don't feel like they need to get board certified, it makes you a better clinician. You don't know what you don't know until you start studying for boards and realizing how important it is to know every detail about the drugs that you're using and know every detail about all the different medical facets that contribute to the behaviors you might be seeing, because as a veterinary behaviorist, as you said, you're a veterinarian first and foremost. And so you need to know the interplay between the physical and the mental for our patients.
Yeah, I think that is such an important piece, and one that surprises me that we could ever have thought were separate. But obviously we have thought it was separate in human medicine and in animal medicine. It's something that now we're having a greater awareness of how behavior is a factor of health, and they are intrinsically tied. So because there were not 8,000 veterinary behaviorists in your life when you were a young child, odds are you didn't grow up dreaming of being a veterinary behaviorist. What was your path to get from childhood to here?
Correct. I didn't even want to be a veterinarian as a child. I think, gosh,
interesting.
I think I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to, be a movie star or something ridiculous like that as a kid. But, came down to earth and, really started with an interest in I had an interest in animal behavior during my undergraduate. So I was kind of exploring different classes, and I really enjoyed ethology and animal behavior. And thought, I'm going to study animals. I'm going to work for National Geographic, have some cool job like that, sitting in the trees. Jane Goodall sort of thing. And my cousin, who was in vet school at the time, she's like, you're not going to touch an animal. Like, really, like those jobs are few and far between. Like, what have you thought about getting a DVM? Like, you'd really have more hands-on work with animals. And I thought, that sounds boring. Vets just give shots to dogs and cats and they hate them. Like, the patients hate them. Why would I want to do that? And she's like, you just go volunteer, just check it out. And I volunteered it was in Arizona. I went to Arizona State for undergrad, and I went to a local busy, referral and emergency clinic. And it was amazing. Like, wow, this is like investigative science and animals all together in one. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. And I thought, all right, I'm going to do it, but maybe I want to be a zoo vet, because I still had that sort of wildlife desire. And I thought, well, okay, I'll go into vet school wanting to be a zoo vet, which plenty of people go into vet school wanting to be a zoo vet, and very few come out still on that career path. It's not as glorious as it seems. But and then I adopted a dog, right? So I think every behaviorist has an animal that changed them, right? I adopted a dog. He was 8 weeks old and he was biting everybody, which is pretty abnormal, pretty severe. And I got all the wrong advice, and I was working for a horse vet at the time. And, everybody out there had a different way to alpha roll or punish this dog. And, I brought him home to, was starting vet school the next year, and found all the wrong trainers and, did the prong collars and all the alpha stuff. And it was a disaster. It wasn't working. It made him so much worse. And it wasn't until I moved to Columbus to start vet school that I met up with an applied animal behaviorist. So Tracy Schreier was helping out at the college at the time, because Ohio State had not committed to employing any veterinary behaviorist. So she was just kind of helping out by, giving her time, and for the most part. And I saw her as a client, and she, introduced me to the world of companion animal behavior, which I didn't even know existed, right? All I knew that there were trainers. Here I was wanting to be a veterinarian. I didn't even know that companion animal behavior was a thing. And so then it was all the worlds came together, right? The love of behavior, the investigative science, veterinary medicine. And so I was like, okay, behavior it is. I want to know more. And so I remember going to our dean at the time and said, okay, I want to do a dual degree, because they offered a dual degree where you could do a PhD and DVM, but I want to do it in behavior. And he kind of laughed and he's like, we don't have that here. Silly girl. I'm like, what do you mean we don't have that here? He's like, you'd have to get someone to donate, millions of dollars to endow a chair. Like, we'll never have behavior here at Ohio State. And I thought, oh gosh. So I just had to go elsewhere. And I remember writing an essay for the APDT offered a scholarship, for vet students. So I wrote an essay about my dog, and either I was the only applicant or it was pretty good because I got it. And I remember sitting in, one of Karen Overall's talks, and I sat next to an older gentleman who happened to be named R.K. Anderson. And we chatted, and boy, that was like the conversation that changed my life, really. And he told me all about what a residency is and who had the residencies. And it was very direct. All right, you need to call Melissa Bain. You need to call Sharon Carl Davis. You need to get to know all these people, and you go visit them and spend time there. And so I did. I looked up, all right, who's going to have residencies? Who would let me spend time with them? And I did. I visited several. I went to Penn, Georgia, Davis, and just sat in that world of veterinary behavior. And every minute I wanted more. And I loved it. And it was really my passion. So applied for lots of residencies, was fortunate enough to get accepted at UPenn with Alana Reisner. And the rest is history. And then, what's really funny is that position of veterinary behavior that was never going to be at Ohio State, fast forward to 2009. And my same friend who encouraged me to go to vet school was actually an administrator at Ohio State, and said, we're thinking of behavior. What would you think about writing a proposal for starting something like that here? And I thought, well, gosh, I didn't think I was planning on coming back to Ohio. I keep trying to leave Ohio and it doesn't work. And so I wrote a proposal, put up a budget, and they said, all right, we'll give you a try. We'll try it for a year. And if you could at least break even, we might keep you around. And so, within, I think, 9-10 months, I had a 3-month waiting list at Ohio State. So again,
wow,
packed up my U-Haul, drove. And even there was faculty there that were like, why do we need a behavior, right? Can't we just look that up in a book? So, there was resistance from within. It was not a warm welcome by everyone. And so here I am, a young woman in vet med in a soft field that was kind of, wow, what's that? And within months was very productive, always broke even. Took a while to be able to justify getting, support staff and residents. So talk about burnout. That was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Especially once, I started having a family, so that became challenging. But, it was great. Starting a program from scratch was really fun. That's how I work. I love starting from scratch and being able to build and create. I don't work well when you stick me into a mold and say, okay, work within this and do the same thing every day. So it was exciting for me, go back to my alma mater and start a new program and to see it expand. So did that. And then was very fortunate enough to meet the founders of my current institution, which is GG's, a shelter organization dedicated to improving the lives of shelter dogs. They are founders. Our founder, George Gestos, is a builder and is, in his 90s and he wanted to do something to help dogs. And he wanted to build, his idea was a sanctuary with a bone-shaped pool and love all the dogs. And fortunately, he had some guidance that said, well, let's see what the need is and see how we can best help it. And so he and his wife, Tina, came to my classes at the vet school to learn about behavior. And they wanted to build a shelter that was not just saving lives, but giving them good quality of lives and doing the best that they could. And so after taking a few classes, they started to build their organization and asked what it would take to get me to jump on board. And at the time I said, well, I wasn't looking to leave. I've got a pretty good gig, but I have sort of, I've spread my wings probably as far as they can go here. And what I would take is a 3-day-a-week job. That's what I need. I just need some breathing room. And if you can make that work, I'll jump ship. And they made it work. So I've jumped ship officially 2.5 years now at this institution. I still am close ties with the vet school, and my resident who was finishing at the time, we made sure that we transitioned so she could take over, so that program did not disappear, because that was something I was not willing to let go of.
Right. Especially that waiting list, everyone would have panicked.
Yes. So, but it's now in wonderful, probably better hands, to be honest. Dr. Lily's very fit for academia and keeping that successful. So, but yeah, I didn't realize how burnt out I was and how just exhausted emotionally and physically until I left. Right. I remember having that panic 2 weeks before I left Ohio State. I was driving home and kind of getting anxious, and I'm not a super anxious person, but I just started to feel this remorse. What have I done? What have I done? A year away from probably full professor, and oh my gosh, I'm going to this brand new organization that could totally fail. And it's shelter. Shelter is good and bad. And I can remember my previous shelter positions aged me quite a bit. There's some downsides to it, even if you feel like you have good impact. Just this sort of panic. Well, it's too late now because I've already got, my replacement there, and it's time to go. And then within a few weeks, just the relief of that pressure. I mean, there's so much in academia that's the variety is wonderful, but there's so much pressure to, create your academic curriculum and teach students and be available to students and solve all of their pets' problems. And then you have your pressure to have your clinics full. You have a 3-month waiting list. You're trying to see as many clients as you can, training your residents, making sure your staff are happy, and then doing scholarship and publishing and book chapters. So it's all of it at once, while raising 2 kids and being married to someone who works overnights and swing shifts and a lot of weekends. So it was a lot, and it's been yeah. So, but it's been a good change for me.
That's awesome. It sounds awful, actually, when you just listed all that out. In my head, I probably would have come up with half of that if someone had said, "What are the responsibilities of someone doing the behavior at a big university like that?" And when you say that, I'm like, well, oh yeah, that too. Oh, that too. But I wouldn't have had those top of mind until you said them. So you said you've always loved kind of diving in and building something new. That's sort of your sweet spot. Has that always been true? Is that just a part of who you are?
So I think I've always been kind of a wanderer and someone who, I was a sassy kid for sure. I got in trouble a lot. If I didn't like the rules, they didn't make sense to me, then I didn't, I found ways to go around them, and that got me in trouble probably a bit more than most kids. But just curious and wanting to make change. I think I can remember starting up behavior clubs, helping start up the shelter medicine club. Yeah, I think maybe without realizing, I think I've always been someone who liked autonomy. whether I was this great creator and made huge impact, in high school and college, probably not. But I knew I worked better with autonomy. If I had someone really pressing on me and having me follow certain parameters, I didn't do well with that. I think probably have undiagnosed ADHD there. Now my daughter is diagnosed and I'm like, oh yeah, I do all of that. I did all of that as a kid, and just high functioning enough to get by. But I think just the way I like to hyper focus on one part and then take a break from that and hyper focus on another. It's just how my brain works. And so to have to stay on task and stay within certain parameters just doesn't work well for my brain. So I think when I have that breathing room, I can do good things. And sometimes it's the way I get there is a little haphazard, but I usually have pretty good follow through.
Yeah, well, clearly, I mean, when you get to board certified anything, you've got good follow through. Like you solved the problem when you can cross that hurdle, because that is a lot of hurdles to get past to get there. So when you started thinking about vet school, you were already thinking about behavior like that far back? Because when you said about the dual degree, that's like before you even started vet school, you wanted to do that?
No, that was a little upset. When I started, I think I'd shifted gears to maybe zoo or wildlife, right? I'd sort of forgotten about behavior. Because I didn't realize that behavior was part of veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. And so I just discovered that I really liked veterinary medicine and I wanted to work with animals. And I still had that wild animal, that zoology background that interested me. And it wasn't until I adopted that dog and then discovered his problems moving back to Columbus for vet school and met with an applied animal behaviorist there and realized, oh, this all comes together very well. Mm-hmm. And kind of my desire to be a zoo vet sort of faded away into the background. Especially as I volunteered with the zoo vets there. Their life's not glamorous at all. It's hard. They have so much bureaucracy, so many politics to deal with, and they don't get paid squat. I mean, it's a tough gig. It sounds really glamorous, but it's definitely a tough gig. They definitely are limited in what they can do and what they can expand. So I feel for them. They're doing great work, but I don't think it would have worked well for me.
You also said you didn't realize how burned out you were until after you were away from the situation and some time had passed, which is so common. That's so common for people to not realize the extent of the repercussions. But I'm wondering if you can tell me one way that you know that now you're in a better state than you were before. Like what is different? How do you know that you're feeling less burnout?
I mean, I think I recognize it to some degree. I can remember being asked to be on a panel it was like a wellness thing for faculty. And it's like, working parents, like, how do you manage it all? How do you do it all? Would you be on this panel? And I said, no. I'm not doing it well at all. I feel like a bad parent. I feel like completely disorganized, disheveled, barely getting by academically. I don't think I'm a good example at all. And at the time, I was training a brand new resident. I had an infant, my second child, an infant and a 2-year-old. And I remember I had to pick up the slack from a resident who had left. So I would be up, I would nurse the baby and then I'd be up till midnight answering client emails. And then get back there at 7, do rounds, try to train my new resident. I would explain it like I get up and I start running. Mm-hmm. I just start running and I run all day and I run all night. And then finally I collapse. I go to bed, sleep for a little bit and then get up. It's just like this treadmill that was constant. There wasn't a reprieve. And things got better once I got more support. Like once the residents were trained, once I got a second resident, once I had a technician and an assistant, just to help with that load, the administrative load and the emails and the paperwork, it's unreal. The behavior has so much of it because there's so much. When a client calls in to make a behavior appointment, it's just a different level of drama and of hand-holding that's needed for that client than someone's calling in to make a surgical appointment or internal medicine. Yeah. And again, some people who are dealing with chronic disease, like dermatology is a good example. It's stressful and there's a long wait, but this is like, these dogs they're going to lose their lives if they don't get in soon and they need help and they need a lot of hand holding. They're very emotional. Mm-hmm. And so to take all that on was hard. And I think, over time I got better at being able to be there for someone without taking on that stress. And that's a hard thing to develop. And I worry about new veterinarians as well as new, behaviorists, because a lot of us are empaths. We feel their stress, we feel their pain, and we feel responsible for their pet's behavior problems. And we feel like failures when we can't fix it. You will just drown. You will go under quickly and you'll leave the field if you don't have a way to say, this isn't about me. I'm here. I hear you. I share your frustration And you can also leave it on the table and know that what they're going through is normal for them, but it isn't your fault and it's not your responsibility to take that all on for them. Otherwise, you'll completely drown. So I'm not saying I didn't drown for a while, but I developed kind of skills to be able to say, this isn't my fault. This isn't about me. I just ran out of bandwidth, to be honest, to be able to do that. I think and then coming away. So here I thought things were getting better, and then coming away from it, just, to breathe. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, you took off 3 days a week so you can spend time with the kids. I go, no, not really. Kids are going to daycare. I just have more time for me. Started by like going through different rooms and organizing them, because the house is just clutter that you just see and you can never reach. It's like, oh, all that mess. I can't get to it someday, right? And as a mom and a person who likes to accomplish things, it's very stressful to live with so much going around you, and you just have to kind of gain that comfort of it's okay. There's mess. It's okay. And so I started by organizing my pantries and organizing the office. But then very rapidly, I filled my time with other projects, right? So I'm currently working on a veterinary textbook for first-year vet students. So there is no textbook right now that is designed for like introduction to veterinary behavior. There's lots of wonderful textbooks. Kathy Help's Domestic Animal Behavior, Karen Overall, as well as Lisa Radosta and Gary Landsberg have their new book, Behavior Problems, the new version coming out, Behavior Problems of the Dog and Cat. There's a lot of clinical textbooks for veterinarians, but there's nothing geared as, hey, this is a companion for your vet school course. Or if you don't have a vet school course, here's a great thing to read to get that information. As I was teaching that to students, I never had a book that could go with it. And for years I said, I'm going to write it. I'm going to do it. And I never had time. And so I decided that I would have time now. But it's a fun project, and it's on my time. It's my term. So I have days off that, yes, I'm working on other projects, but it's my choice. It's my freedom, and just having that control over what I choose to or not to do is stress relieving for sure. And, if I want to get my kids early and go do something, I can. Sometimes we do. It's just nice to have the flexibility and the freedom to have that choice of what I can and can't do on those days. I could be at home if I wanted. I could work on stuff for work. A lot of times I do. I'm doing stuff for Gigi. This is a very intense job. And I think if I did it 5 days a week, it'd be too much, because I'm full force when I'm here for sure. And it's exciting and fun stuff, but it's also, a lot of it's emotionally charged. So it's good to have a break.
Yeah. How old are your kids now?
They are 6 and 8, 2 girls. Just started first grade and third grade. So getting out of that high maintenance toddler phase for sure was helpful also.
Yes. Yeah. I think I wrote my first book when my youngest kid went to first grade. Like that was when there was just enough bandwidth in my life to allow me to see that maybe there could be a creative project. But you had said about not taking on all of the emotion of the clients and the responsibility for the outcomes. And that is like the best advice anyone can ever give, and the hardest advice to follow. Like, it's not something I learned until after I burned out and just got to a point where I couldn't take anymore, but then I beat myself up about that. So we have so many people in these fields who are amazing, talented, capable, impassioned people who, because they hold that empathy and responsibility and drive so tightly, that they wind up hurting themselves and their long-term ability to make the difference that they could make forever when they put it all out there and then don't save anything for replenishing themselves, I guess is where I'm trying to go. So I'm curious, when you're working with the newer vet students and the people who are coming into the field, what are the things you suggest to them to really help them see that doing what they can is not the same as making everything perfect?
Yes, that's a good word. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? I think I tell people, and I didn't take this advice at first, right? I took it all on as, this is my responsibility and I have to fix everything. And then when people are upset that their dogs still aren't fixed, and then I feel like it's my fault and I failed them, that's very difficult. I think from a behavior standpoint, people coming out, I say, you try not to read email right before you go to bed, because you'll see that email and it's going to sit with you and you're going to perseverate on it and you're not going to sleep well. And then it's going to be on your mind. You'll have that dread in the morning. That, or you're going to get rid of it and then you want to respond that night. And then you're also telling your clients you don't have boundaries and that you're willing to respond to them immediately. And what I found with most behavior emergencies is that if people have the day to kind of sit on it, now there's some that need immediate attention, but there's very few. Most can sit on it for the day, let the clients come out of that emotional state of mind, because it's not going to be a good conversation, even if it's by email, it's just not. And so, but I will tell them, if you feel like you need to respond to it because you have an answer, respond to it, but delay the send. If you need to answer it that night so it's off your plate, delay the send till the next day. Because it sends a message to the client that you kind of have hours, you have boundaries, and that, it also waits. So when they read your email, they're in a better state and they're better able, because otherwise they shoot right back at you with that angry state of mind. And then you go back and forth all day. And that's the worst, right? Because then you're telling them that you're available all the time and you're feeding into that emotion that's all theirs, right? It's normal. They're upset. They're sad. They're angry, but that's not at you. It's about their situation. So you have to try to say, this isn't about me. This really isn't about me. And remind yourself of that. And that it is okay for someone to be upset for a little while, but usually it's better if they've had a little time to simmer on it. And that we can't fix it all, right? There's not enough of us. And especially today, there are way too many problems with dogs and cats right now that we can't fix it all. So you just have to look at, all right, the ones I can't help, I can do that with quality and help as best I can. And the rest, it's unfortunate. And so that's why for me, being where I am now, to have impact where hopefully I can start with what's the population that's getting adopted? Like, how can I help filter that out? So maybe we're putting less of these out into the world. Maybe we're working with modifying things or using psychopharmacology to help aid in transitions for pets, and maybe they won't reach that disaster point so quickly or at all, right, if we do that. So for me, shifting gears to a different impact, there was somebody put a meme. It was great. It was someone who's a human social worker, and it was, we need to stop pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in the first place. So I kind of feel like this job allows me to be upstream a little bit and think about, all right, how can we stop this faucet of problems coming out of shelter and rescue dogs? So certainly we do the best job we can, and we get dogs returned for behavior reasons, even though we have support and we try to support them. And we are saying to them, like, this isn't okay. Like, we don't want you to keep this dog. This isn't safe for you. The dog doesn't have a quality of life. We probably should think about humane euthanasia. It's for everyone's safety and for that dog's well-being. Sometimes that is the kindest choice for that animal. So we deal with that. And that always really is a bummer. But again, you have to, okay, it's not my fault the dog went out, and I can't fix them all, but it is, I can support people and provide them resources to help them cope better without being their personal, counselor. But you can give people support without taking on, their emotional burden.
Well, even your tip about delaying the send on email, the way you phrased it is very supportive to the professional helping someone else. So if you had told them delay the send so that you show like that you're not available, then people would be like, oh, but I just need to get it off my plate. I just need to know it's gone. Mm-hmm. But if you say delay the send so that they have time to kind of process the emotions they're having, and that they can then respond from a better spot, and that you have actually done them a favor by not responding right away.
Correct.
That is almost permission that people are searching for sometimes. Like, how am I allowed to set a boundary? I don't know if I'm allowed to set a boundary, but the way you phrased that made it so that not only are you allowed to set a boundary, and that it's important to set a boundary for yourself, but that it's actually helpful for the person on the receiving end. It does give us better outcomes over time for all of these pieces. Like when we recognize we're not fully responsible for all of the results of how a case turns out, but we are responsible for providing what support we can. What does that look like? How do I provide resources? There's a line there that you're drawing very beautifully. And I'm sure that the listeners are going to hear that there are distinctions being made of how much we need to carry. And I always ask guests for some words that have meaning to them. And you gave me some of my favorite words to date. So what you said was the words that have meaning for you are, we can do it all. We just need to gain some comfort with mediocrity. I have to tell you, I laughed out loud when I read that. I was like, gain comfort with mediocrity. Oh, I don't know. Oh, I don't know. A lifetime of trying to do things right. I'm not sure I have that comfort yet. So I'm dying to learn. What does that mean to you?
I'm not saying it came easy. It was just, it's my work in progress, and kind of my mantra when I'm beating myself up about, and working mothers know this, right? Where you're a crappy parent or you're a crappy employee, right? It's one or the other. And so, well, maybe I don't have to be crappy at either, but I also don't have to be awesome or perfect at either. So if I can just give what my bandwidth allows, and it's probably not mediocre to everyone's standard. I think some people are like, wow, you do a great job. You're not a terrible parent, but I feel like I am. So it's that comfort of it's just good enough. It's what my view of what mediocrity is. I think those of us in these professions are somewhat perfectionists. I don't know that I'm a perfectionist, but I have ambition and I like to see things through, and I like things to be done well, even if not perfect. But I know that if I was just a mom, I'd probably be a better mother. And I know if I was just a veterinary behaviorist, I'd probably be better, but I'm both. And I want to do it all. I want both. I love both. So I just have to be able to say, and the level that I'm doing this is good enough. And it might be mediocre by my standards, but I just have to gain comfort with that. So I just have to take a step back. It's okay. It's good enough. It's mediocre, but hey, it's mediocre on both, and neither is terrible. So that's got to be good enough.
Yeah. Years ago, my brother said he heard the quote that behind every great kid was a mom who's convinced she's screwing it up. And he was sharing it with me because I was convinced I was screwing it up. And I think that that's kind of true, that we have this belief that maybe we're not doing it right or good. And what you just said about, if I was just a mom, maybe I'd be a better mom. And if I was just a veterinary behaviorist, maybe I'd be a better veterinary behaviorist. Wow, that was hard to say. And I would bet that that's not true. That if you're really honest with who you are on the inside, I would bet that there would be a piece of you seeking and longing for something that wasn't there. And this way, with the attitude and mindset that you have adopted, you've got a really healthy way of looking at life as rich and varied and imperfect, but really darn good. And we get caught sometimes measuring our performance against the picture in our head, which usually is pretty close to perfect, and thinking, I'm not doing that well. But from the outside, like you said, people are saying, I think you're a really good mom, and I think you're a really good veterinary behaviorist. They are actually observing more objective measures than we are, because they're not trying to measure against perfection as we do sometimes internally.
And externally, right? When you're at the events at your kid's school and you see moms that they're the lunch lady for the day and they're picking up right at the end of school and they're way more involved, and you assume they're judging you. They're not. I'm assuming taking their place. Gosh, it's so great. You're so there for your kids all the time, and I'm not. You must think I'm a bad mom. They don't.
Yeah.
But you don't do that. Or being with my employees, I have a lot of either direct reports, or this isn't true there, but when I was at university, most of my bosses, nobody had kids. And so I was assuming they're judging me because I'm having to leave at a certain time, or I'm behind because this is not the productivity that they would expect from someone who's not a parent. And as a woman, we get no slack. And we don't give each other slack either. I remember being in a meeting and one of the other faculty members saying, oh gosh, I just got to give it to Dr. X, a male. He's got 2 kids and he's really trying hard. And I was thinking, his wife, she doesn't work. What do you mean? What? My husband works weekends. He's a human medical hospitalist. So he works weekends. He works second shifts. I'm doing this all and working full time. Nobody's saying, oh, that poor Dr. Herron, gosh, she's got so much on her plate. But, a guy has a couple kids and is a good dad. And suddenly wow, I really feel for him. And this is a woman saying this who had children. We sabotage each other. I don't understand. But yeah.
It's because it's just part of the culture that we're we don't even notice it. That woman didn't see the sexism in her comment. My oldest son had a baby this year in January. So she's still really little. And very early on, he was asking me all sorts of questions like, how could he be a good dad? And I mean, it was so sweet. It was really touching. And he said, what I've learned in all of my asking and researching is that to be a good dad and to be a kind of crappy mom is exactly the same bar. And I was like, oh dear, that's bad. And he was like, I don't mean it in that way it sounds, but really when you look at like, what do you have to do to be a good mom? The bar is pretty high. And what you have to do to be a good dad, the bar is not that high. And I was like, I think you just need to love her and take care of her and care about what she thinks and feels. And he was like, I can do that. But when he realized that, the messaging is very different, and the messaging his wife was absorbing was a little different than some of what he was absorbing. And it's just, we don't even notice. There was actually in yesterday's Washington Post, there was an article about some of the discrimination and weight that female employees without children experience, where they might be considered less prepared for a managerial role because, they're not parents and they haven't managed those pieces. And there is more data showing all of the ways that women with children are held back professionally. And now this data saying how women without children are held back professionally. And we're not really looking at how men with and without children, no, not as much of an issue. But I think if you were to say to the average woman, we need to gain some comfort with mediocrity, I think most of them would react as I did, with a little bit of surprise, shock, and discomfort of like, I don't know if I can.
Yes. Well, but you have to, right? In some cases, because otherwise you're just going to be constantly disappointed and beating yourself up. You just got to at some point say it's good enough.
Yeah. And when we constantly beat ourselves up, that actually adds so much more weight than whatever it was that we're beating ourselves up about. And so to be able to let that go is incredibly powerful. So I love that. So if you had one wish for all the people who work with animals, particularly pets, but animals of any sort, but this is your wish for the people who work with them, what would it be?
I wish that they could see the good that they are doing and let that be what radiates and motivates them and perseverates in their mind, rather than those that they can't fix or haven't helped, right? And to have that focus and to sit at night and cherish all the, even if they're small victories, right? So one dog with separation anxiety can stay home alone for half an hour. Hey, couldn't even do 5 minutes a week ago. Like, let's cherish the victories we've made and try to focus less on maybe the challenges we face or the dogs that we or cats we haven't fully fixed, because it isn't about us and we are helping that dog or cat. Even if it ends up being a euthanasia decision, sometimes that's what's best for that pet. I just had a conversation with one of our trainers who's having a hard time with we've been taking in more challenging cases, and some of them we have to make that hard behavioral euthanasia choice because it's the most humane path for that dog. And I say, we have to think about, you helped this dog find success, because the other choice was to leave it in this rural source shelter, rotting for months, barely being walked, sitting in its own feces with no interaction, constantly circling. And instead we brought it here and we gave it 3 weeks of a comfortable place to live, of, outside exercise 3 times a day, psychopharmacology to help them. And they didn't end up in a home because they're not a safe pet. But you helped them find that path to what was their best success. And they really said, gosh, that's a good way of thinking about it. Like, I helped them find that path to success. Even if euthanasia is the outcome, it was still a success for that dog because it was better than what the alternative was where they were.
Right.
And so try to focus on, you are finding the path to success. That's the best. And sometimes what success is may still feel like it's failure to the client or it wasn't what you love. It wasn't 100% rehabilitation of whatever you were treating, but you made them get to the point that was their best success possible. I fully believe that we do that even in those, but we focus on what we didn't accomplish, but to just focus on and cherish those things you do accomplish and cherish those small victories. I try to tell my clients that too. Just cherish those small victories, no matter how small. Sit at night and have some gratitude for what you've accomplished, so that you just run that narrative in your brain, because you really do make a huge difference. And if you weren't around, think of those thousands of pets that would have no help, right, their success would never have been found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really powerful. That's a beautiful wish. I love that. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
Yeah, you can find us at GIGIS, so GIGIS.org, and we can learn about our shelter, learn about the impact we have on our shelter partners. If you want to adopt a dog from Central Ohio, come and see us. And, we're always looking, we're always expanding our programming. I think our long-term dream would be to see more GIGIs around the country and to be able to help, that kind of fill that gap between, the high demand of our high supply of dogs in these sort of rural under resourced areas and match those, high resourced parts of the country that are looking for dogs and are desperate to fill their shelters, right? If we could just try to fill that gap, and that's our main goal. So keep checking around, and hopefully we'll find a way to reach you wherever you are.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking to me today. This was really fun conversation, and I'm really grateful for you to share your thoughts.
Oh, it was really great to talk to you, Colleen. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at colleenpilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and be long.